031, hey. Eat my chainsaw sword. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 2 days passed. Google search reading, Rorschach still hasn't received a call from Eugene. He was not in a hurry, because there was no point in being anxious. Luo Xia, who lives a leisurely life, took the time to post a few recruitment posters for her aunt. The rest of the time was almost spent studying. During this period of time, he had been studying hard and didn't even open the simulator interface. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Rorschach was sitting at his desk, concentrating on emotions. I plan to compete. With high school knowledge, ding. Right now, Rorschach's cell phone screen flickered and received a new message. He picked it up casually. After seeing the message from Eugene, I subconsciously clicked on it. However, Rorschach only gave it a cursory glance. His whole face became serious, and his eyes even opened a lot. Eugene, something might have happened. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent a message with weird content. Sender, Eugene. Long time no see, brother, I found what you were looking for. I'm in the Battery Park Tunnel in Brooklyn. There's a maintenance passage in the middle. I'll be waiting for you inside. See you there. Not only is the title at the beginning of the message wrong, and Eugene wouldn't say see you there or not at the end of the message, this doesn't fit Eugene's character at all, especially when facing Rorschach. Also, the address so detailed. He also revealed the other party's fear that Rorschach would not be found. Thinking of this, Luo Xia stood up slowly with a stern expression. This is a phishing message. However, since someone wants to fish through Eugene, then the target must not be Eugene, but him. Since the other party likes fishing so much, then be careful what you catch is a great white shark. Luo Xia's eyes flashed coldly. He quickly put on the holster of the plasma pistol on his back. Another loose coat was put on to block the terrifyingly powerful murder weapon. He was about to turn around and leave, but his eyes accidentally fell on the chain sword beside him. At this moment, the cold saw teeth shone slightly, as if eager for the infiltration of hot blood. Because the box I ordered hasn't arrived yet, without any hesitation, Rorschach turned around and pulled out a gray sheet. The whole package covered the 1 meter and 5 meter long chain sword, which was tucked under his arm. Then, he put on a black cap and mask, stepped out of the house. Brooklyn, the middle section of the tunnel with constant traffic. After Rorschach parked his motorcycle, he stood at the entrance of the maintenance channel. His eyes darted around. Rorschach found a large chain of rusty chains that had been broken. It was thrown to the ground casually, facing the dark passage with the door open. A cold breath kept coming, brushing against his face. Rorschach raised his hand and grasped the hilt of the chainsword. At the same time, he also opened the zipper of his jacket, so that he can draw the plasma pistol from its holster. Then, an expressionless Rorschach walked into the passage. Take a few steps in a row. Rorschach stood at the entrance of the cave and quickly adapted to the change in light. He squinted his eyes and took in the surroundings inside. The interior of the passage is about 3 meters high and 2 meters wide. The entire road stretches straight. Every few meters, emergency lights with yellow lights have been turned on. All the way leads to a dark place with dim light. At this time, the stern-looking Rorschach tore off the sheets wrapped around the chain sword and threw it onto the wet ground. Then he held the chainsword in one hand, moved forward inward with steady steps, walked about 20 meters. The only corner of the straight passage appeared in front of Rorschach. Rorschach listened carefully. Then, he turned his steps and stepped in sideways. However, the moment Rorschach turned the corner, whoosh, from the shadows deeper in the passage, a stone the size of a fist suddenly flew out. Luo Xia's eyes narrowed. The chain sword was subconsciously raised up and held horizontally in front of him. Boom! The collision of metal and stone made a loud noise. The flying stones suddenly hit the top of the passage and then fell to the ground. At this moment, a man with a height of over 1.9 meters appeared. Between the sharply curved body surfaces, the blonde woman completely covered by a layer of silver metal is revealed. The response was good, but unfortunately it was just good. The blonde woman seemed to be complimenting. It seemed like he was just laughing at Rorschach's overestimation. Are you Rorschach? Immediately afterwards, the woman wearing silver armor asked with cold eyes and an indifferent tone. Mercenary? Or agent? Rorschach was silent. His eyes traveled over the blonde woman's tall frame, the silver metal armor covering the whole body, and that delicate face full of Slavic features. Rorschach, who squinted his eyes, took a deep breath and said slowly, You're not, just an ordinary person who loves life. Are you the real leader of the sportswear gang? He. Before she finished speaking, the tall body of the blonde woman swayed slightly, and she sneered, her eyes seemed to be full of disdain. I'm not interested in your personal grudges. I'll only ask you once, where is Sergei? Ah, I understand. However, facing the blonde woman's question, Rorschach suddenly sighed. It's just a personal grudge. In an instant, Rorschach suddenly switched the chainsaw sword to his left hand, his right hand drooped slightly, and his fingertips were ready to move. Unfortunately, the blonde woman seemed to have misunderstood Rorschach's actions. It may also be that she trusted the defensive ability of her silver armor too much. She glanced at the chainsaw sword in Rorschach's hand with a flickering look in her eyes, and said jokingly, "Young man, times have changed. A mere cold weapon can't give you any comfort." At the same time, the blonde woman with cold eyes raised her palm, and her fingers covered with silver metal slowly clenched into fists. Now is the age of technology. The age of wisdom. Do you think Tony Stark is the only one in the world who has high-tech armor? Too naive. A fanatical smile appeared at the corner of the blonde woman's mouth, the arm wrapped in silver metal swung violently, the metal armor on the whole body made a cold noise of mechanical structure friction. This turned out to be a powerful set of technological armor. The blonde woman took a deep breath and repeated, "One last question, where is Sergei?" But the next moment, Rorschach, with his eyes narrowed, suddenly smiled. He stared at the other party with a sincere expression and said, "Times have changed. Times have changed." Before the voice fell, Rorschach took out the plasma pistol like lightning and pulled the trigger. American IA's pistol drawing technique. Bang bang bang, blue light balls the size of a human head surged out and shot at the blonde woman. In a flash, the dazzling hot plasma covered most of the passage. Like a violent flood that broke through the dam, sweeping everything in front of it. Then, Rorschach, with an indifferent look in his eyes, actually let go of the plasma pistol without hesitation and let the weapon fall. His muscles suddenly swelled. He followed the terrifying plasma wave closely and charged forward. At the same time, Rorschach, holding the hilt tightly with both hands, also pressed the switch of the motor. Boom boom boom. In an instant, the roar of the chainsaw sword exploding, once again resounded through the world. 032, Jigsaw. You are listening at MTnovel.audio. The hot plasma gets closer to the target, the volume expands more and more, almost half of the passage is covered. The edge of the plasma frenzy melted parts of the walls, wisps of dark red magma dripped down. At the same time, even if the plasma is not really close yet, extreme heat, distorting the air, has also arrived. The exposed fair skin of the blonde woman suddenly became chapped, and her golden hair was on fire. Just for a moment, she completely put away her arrogance, only shock and fear are left. Plasma weapons. At the moment of life and death, the blonde woman crushed the ground with force. The whole person jumped back, tried to use the powerful power of the silver armor to dodge. Unfortunately, the terrifying plasma is like a tidal wave. The spread speed is also much faster than human nervous reaction. In the blink of an eye, the blonde woman's foot and part of her calf that she couldn't retract in time instantly vaporized. Even the silver armor she was proud of couldn't withstand the high-temperature plasma of thousands of degrees. She didn't even have time to feel the pain. He could only rely on his survival instinct to struggle desperately. Just as the blonde woman's body was about to fall, she used her only remaining foot to crush the ground again and tried her best to dodge backwards. At this moment, tiles of blue plasma balls exploded completely. The extreme high temperature instantly melted the floor and walls of the passage. A small dark red magma lake quickly formed. Boom boom boom. However, the high temperature that distorted the air did not wait for it to dissipate. Accompanied by the deafening roar of the motor, a tall figure holding a chainsword jumped over the lava lake. The soles of his shoes began to melt and burn. Even the clothes and pants on his body were emitting bursts of smoke. The chain sword tilted as hard as possible in his hand scraped the top of the passage, leaving dents that were several inches deep. At this moment, the ferocious-looking Rorschach looked like a terrifying demon that had broken out of the burning hell. At this moment, the blonde woman's once fair and delicate appearance was completely damaged. Only pieces of cracked flesh and blood were left. All the blonde hair on his head had also disappeared, large and small blisters and ulcers remained. One of her eyes also seemed to be blinded by the heat, the remaining eyes are full of endless pain and despair. Roar! Then, there was a roar that resounded through the passage. Rorschach held a roaring chain sword and slashed hard on the shaky blonde woman with only one leg left. Kakaka! Rorschach gritted his teeth and pressed down hard on the chain sword that struck from his left shoulder. The saw teeth composed of single molecular blades rotate rapidly. The roaring chainsword cut through butter like a hot knife. Not only did it easily saw through the so-called high-tech armor, it also instantly embedded itself into the opponent's flesh and bones. Laugh. Countless blood spattered out instantly and fell on Luo Xia's body. Because the injury was too serious, the blonde woman, who had been confused for a long time, couldn't help but let out a miserable howl, and seemed to wake up. She subconsciously raised her arms to fight back. Unfortunately, the ferocious-looking Luo Xia didn't give her any chance. Under the spray of blood, he actually sawed the blonde woman's tall body in half with his roaring chain sword. Click. The chain sword that was still roaring was inserted into the ground with the rotation of its saw teeth. Boom. Colorful internal organs and other human body parts, along with the sound of the blonde woman splitting into two and falling to the ground, there were many sounds. Taking a deep breath, Rorschach forcefully pulled out the chain sword with its teeth still rotating from the ground. The fingertips moved slightly, and the roar of the motor was completely extinguished. It was only at this moment that Rorschach, who had relaxed, felt the stinging pain in his feet. He looked down and saw that the shoes on both feet were almost burned. The soles of the feet inside cannot withstand the burning temperature. The skin was red, hot, and had many blisters. Rorschach couldn't help but gasp. He quickly took off his still hot shoes and stood barefoot on the warm ground. Sometimes, being too involved in fighting is not a good thing. Rorschach squinted his eyes, shook his head and sighed. 5 minutes later, the pain in Rorschach's feet gradually subsided. He held the chain sword and turned his head to glance at the magma lake that was emitting dark red heat. And the plasma pistol that fell on the opposite side. Then, his eyes swept across the messy woman's body. Rorschach decided to deal with these matters later. He turned and walked deeper into the passage. The blonde woman, whose name was not even revealed, was dead, but it remains to be seen whether Eugene is dead or alive. At the end of the entire passage is a small room where tools and equipment are stored. Today, it's empty. There was only a dim emergency light on in a corner near the passage. Just under the dim light, one was completely stripped naked. The tall man, whose hands were chained to the water pipe, huddled on the wet ground full of water stains. At this time, Eugene was lying under a faucet. Drops of water kept falling on the pale-skinned face. His eyes were closed, unresponsive. He seemed to have been subjected to extremely painful waterboarding and mental abuse and humiliation. Rorschach stepped forward quickly and found that Eugene's chest was still heaving. Bang! He swung the chainsaw sword and cut off the chain that locked Eugene's wrist. Eugene was like a rag doll that had been discarded. He fell directly to the ground and did not wake up. Rorschach dragged Eugene to the side with one hand. He checked carefully and confirmed that Eugene had fallen into a deep coma. This was not something he could help. Eugene needed medical assistance. Rorschach looked down at the blood splattered all over his body, and then looked at the water pipe that was still dripping. Rorschach took off his clothes and began to clean the blood everywhere. At the same time, his eyes fell on Eugene's clothes scattered around not far away. About an hour later, the lava lake was completely cooled, and Rorschach successfully recovered the plasma pistol of the unhappy machine soul. He wanted to collect the silver armor of the blonde woman to see if it could be used, but he found that the sawed armor was completely damaged and worthless. Feeling that he had lost 100 million, Rorschach placed the bloody clothes that needed to be destroyed near the corpse with an expressionless face. He took out the plasma pistol again and pulled the trigger. Swish! The plasma ball gushed out. It completely covered the corpse on the ground and everything around it. After confirming that the corpse was destroyed, Rorschach, with an expressionless face, carried Eugene, who was still unconscious in his underwear. The traffic outside the passage was still busy. Rorschach picked up the bed sheet he had thrown away before and wrapped the chainsaw sword again. Then, he patiently waited for time to pass, just checked Eugene's condition from time to time, until the sky gradually darkened and the traffic became sparse. Rorschach disguised the unconscious Eugene as a drunk friend and took him to a public telephone booth on a motorcycle. He contacted the hospital ambulance and waited until he heard the ambulance siren. Rorschach held the chainsaw sword under his armpit and rode away on the lamb. 033, The Blood Army of Khorne. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Rorschach returned home as if he had just completed a simple task. Google search reading that it's really simple in a sense, it's just sawing a person open. Unfortunately, Eugene's unexpected encounter and coma, this also brought Rorschach's resource replenishment plan to a standstill again. Rorschach decided to try the number he had obtained from a private gun dealer, see if you can establish a basic connection with the other person, however, before Rorschach could take action. Early the next morning, Rorschach planned to go to the restaurant with his aunt to clean up the housework, but unexpectedly received a strange phone call. Rorschach answered with a frown. Only then did they realize that Eugene, who was in a deep coma, actually woke up, and he was contacted through the nurse's cell phone. Rorschach hesitated for a moment, still decided to take a wad of money and go to the hospital to visit Eugene. After all, the other party is also a friend who helps him get information. Brooklyn Hospital. Rorschach came to the emergency reception desk. After a brief inquiry, a black nurse on duty informed Eugene of the location of his ward. At the same time, it means that the other party is waiting for a visit. However, the patient needs to rest, not for too long. After Rorschach expressed his thanks, he was about to turn around, but I overheard another white nurse whispering gossip. Last night, a man who was sent for treatment woke up from a coma. I had a nervous breakdown and cried for hours. The whole person is like a child who has been greatly wronged and stimulated. Rorschach couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. It seems that Eugene's torture in the past few days has been very difficult. However, wait until Rorschach finds Eugene's hospital room. After he pushed the door open and entered, he saw a completely different Eugene than he had imagined. I saw Eugene sitting on the hospital bed wearing a neck brace, his back straight, his eyes were staring straight ahead. Although his overall mental state was sluggish, the eyes that occasionally show up are different from before, brighter. Hi, Rorschach. Eugene, who was in a daze, saw Rorschach entering the door at a glance. He suddenly showed a bright smile and waved hello excitedly. Do you need to call the doctor? Rorschach, who squinted his eyes, stared at Eugene, who had undergone tremendous changes in temperament and behavior, and couldn't help but say, Eugene, I feel something is not right with you. It's okay, Rorschach, this is not your problem. I have indeed changed a lot from the inside out, but I think this is a good thing. Eugene maintained a bright smile on his face. He blinked a few times and said clearly, although I don't quite remember what happened to me these days, I know it was probably you who saved me. I still remember what you asked me for help before. So, in order to repay your life-saving grace, I have found a suitable candidate for you through my friend's connections. Aaron Davis from Queens. He can provide you with more help. Before he finished speaking, the smiling Eugene took out a note from under the pillow and handed it to Rorschach. This is his contact information. I have already informed him in advance for you. You need to negotiate the specific quantity and price yourself. Rorschach looked at Eugene repeatedly. He took the note anyway and put it in his pocket. Then he took out a wad of cash, planned to put it in front of Eugene. However, Rorschach's actions attracted Eugene's rejection. Eugene tried to lift his chin, and a faint glow seemed to appear on his still pale and swollen face. He said to Rorschach with a sincere expression, I'm contacting you because you saved my life. I used to be a school bully who bullied others. I'm not a real bad guy, but I'm not a good guy either. Rorschach, I want to be a truly good guy in the future. The origin of every penny must be clean, so please fulfill my wish. Hearing Eugene's words, Rorschach frowned. After a moment, he shook his head and took back the money. At the same time, he smiled lightly and said, Eugene, I hope you can succeed and become a good person. After saying that, Rorschach turned and left. Just when he was about to step out of the ward door, suddenly he turned around and said, By the way, Eugene, don't work in Manhattan for at least a year. Brooklyn and Queens are fine too. If you believe me, then believe me. If you don't, forget it. Goodbye. Rorschach said goodbye and left the ward. Only a confused Eugene was left sitting on the hospital bed in a daze. Later, Rorschach left the ward. The first thing he did was to advance the bill for Eugene's ward, and reserved his phone number. When Rorschach stepped out of the hospital, he couldn't help but sigh. Eugene was probably in extreme fear and pain. There are quite a few personality problems. Even if Rorschach is not a psychiatrist, you can also detect some clues, but this is for the former Eugene. Whether it is good or bad cannot be evaluated. Rorschach, who squinted his eyes, sat on the little sheep. He took out the note, took a look at it, and dialed the phone without hesitation. After a short waiting tone, the call was connected. A male voice with an obvious black accent reached Rorschach's ears. "Who? Aaron Davis? I'm Eugene's friend. Has he told you?" Rorschach had a brief conversation with the other party, and agreed to make the first transaction in 3 days. If everything goes well, the two sides will maintain long-term cooperation, and faced with the wholesale price of 250 yuan for a brand new gun. Rorschach still chose the old gun that the other party said was 100 yuan. Old guns are all murder weapons with criminal records. In any case, the simulator will not let go of any firearm that can be fired. Long guns and short guns are recovered in 1 hour, so Rorschach naturally hopes that the source of goods is as cheap as possible. Finally, the resource issue is settled. Rorschach is obviously much more excited. He took a last glance at the hospital and started the motorcycle. After nightfall, Rorschach, who had packed up everything, lay down on the bed with peace of mind, impatiently opened the simulator that had been waiting for many days. Simulation starting. Current identity, Katakan recruit, Krieg Grenadier. Please choose your identity first. If you refuse, you will be randomly assigned. Identity selection has been refused. Simulation starting. You have descended into the Warhammer universe. Time, 41. Location, Galaxy, Unknown Star Region, Rune V. You have descended onto the surface of the planet. You find yourself in a land of ice and snow, surrounded by countless snowflakes. You don't have time to feel the biting cold. You hear the familiar roar of the infernal gun and the whine of the laser gun firing desperately. You look in the direction of the sound and see a Chaos Space Marine with a body of 2 meters and 3 meters tall, with horns and skulls hanging all over his blood-red power armor, who has just torn a mortal soldier alive and is bathing in hot blood in the hail of bullets. 034, Saving the Emperor, Part 1. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Before you can curse, the Khorne berserker with a pair of rabbit ears on his blood-red helmet has already locked onto you with his auspicious instrument. You try to pull your legs out of the knee-thick snow and fight back. Google search reading. The screaming Khorne berserker throws down the corpse, raises the terrifying chainsaw axe, and charges towards you. You try to pick up a fallen laser gun and pull the trigger desperately. The scorching laser that is enough to annihilate flesh and blood only adds a few small dents to the Khorne berserker's power armor. You are less than 5 meters away from the Khorne berserker. The roar from the turning teeth of the chainsaw axe shakes your eardrums, and the stench of blood stimulates your nasal cavity. You fall into despair. You squeeze the trigger tightly, trying to cause an overload of the laser gun battery, trying to cause some damage to the opponent before dying. You regretted not praying to the Emperor for protection before you descended. You are about to be torn into pieces, and you are on the verge of death. At the critical moment, an orange-red hot melt that melted a large piece of snow penetrated the power backpack of the Khorne berserker, causing an extremely violent explosion. At this moment, the roaring chainsaw axe was only half a meter away from you. You were blown away by the terrifying shock wave in front of you. You spurted blood from your mouth and nose, and you were dizzy and about to fall into a coma. Before your eyes closed, you vaguely saw that several elite soldiers wearing closed helmets stood up from the heavy snow 10 meters away. Each of them held a powerful infernal gun and fired an execution-style shot at the Khorne berserker, who was not dead yet and was still screaming. Every shot hit the opponent's rabbit ear helmet and completely melted the opponent's head. You fell into darkness and passed out. You were seriously injured, but barely survived. You gradually woke up from your coma, and you found that the pain from your internal organs had disappeared. You tried to get up and check the environment, but a hoarse male voice stopped you. You turned your head and looked at the snow cave built of ice and snow. A bearded man wearing a carapace was repairing and assembling a purgatory gun. He was still chewing rations in his mouth, and the residue was all over his brown beard. You first thanked him for saving you, and then expressed your loyalty to the Emperor. The bearded man did not raise his head. After swallowing the food in his mouth, he said that it was your courage that saved you. You were able to pull the trigger in the face of the Chaos Astartes charge, showing enough loyalty. You wanted to get up and continue communicating with the bearded man, but before you opened your mouth, a relatively warm ration was thrown into your arms. You were so hungry that you ate without expressing your gratitude. The bearded man stopped repairing, stared at you who were eating voraciously, and gave you two choices. Return to the Imperial base, and you will definitely be warmly welcomed by the 412th Cadian Blitz Regiment and the friendly hospitality from the Inquisition. Or accept the order from General Stun and follow them to carry out a difficult mission that may not return. Death becomes commonplace. Khorne berserkers are just appetizers, the green-skinned orcs who are waiting to fight are your dance partners, and the pointed ears in the shadows will accompany you into sleep, if you can survive until the next day. You did not hesitate and chose to carry out the mission. The bearded man frowned and asked you why you chose this. The threats of the Inquisition are ineffective against you, and the Cadian Blitz Regiment will protect your life. You described your past combat experience vaguely. When the other party heard that you had joined the Krieg Death Legion and the Valhalla Ice Legion, the hesitation in his eyes gradually turned into shock. The bearded man chose to believe your words and thought that you were the Emperor's messenger. You stared at the other party's increasingly fiery fighting spirit and did not refute. On the first day, you followed the bearded man to get to know the other team members. This is a 6-man combat team. The bearded man is a sergeant and also the commander of the team. You obtained several sets of blood-stained Cadian standard camouflage uniforms, and their owners belonged to those Cadian soldiers who offered their loyalty. You changed into clothes without disdain to resist the ubiquitous cold. You obtained a laser gun and 3 fragmentation grenades from the bearded sergeant. You tried to get more weapons from the other party. The other team members laughed in a low voice, and the bearded sergeant had to explain to you. The mission time is tight. If you choose to join the team, you must become a heavy-duty soldier. It will be your responsibility to carry more weapons and equipment. You did not hesitate and gladly accepted the position. You think you are just a currency of the Emperor and do not need any preferential treatment. The next day, your team was surrounded by a group of green-skinned orcs. They are from the notorious Goth clan, a group of terrifying greenskins who love close combat and long-handled grenades. They are stronger and taller than ordinary greenskins. Faced with the sudden attack, the team you joined showed an extremely efficient fighting method and a tacit understanding full of discipline. You lie prone in the snow, and before you can take off your supplies and equipment, the battle is over. While cleaning the battlefield, you can't help but ask about the true origins of the team out of curiosity. The bearded sergeant smiled but said nothing, and a young team member proudly said, "They are the elite of the Cadian Blitzkrieg, and the supreme glory of the Cadian people. They are Kashyyyk." On the third day, the snow covered the sky and the earth, and the team was safe. The journey was difficult, and you were exhausted by the heavy supplies. The team members wanted to share your weight, but you firmly refused. You think they need to maintain their combat effectiveness and face more dangerous enemies. And you also discovered that you can recover from fatigue and injuries through sleep, which must be the blessing from the Emperor. The team rested, and the bearded sergeant entered your snow pit and told you the real mission of this trip. Not long ago, an Emperor-class Titan, Dominatus, fell on this planet. This is one of the most powerful weapons of the Empire and the most precious creation of the Mechanicus. It cannot afford any loss. The Kashyyyk team you joined is just one of many teams. More Imperial teams are on the way to rescue. You have proved your loyalty again through the hard work of the past few days. The Sergeant Major hopes that you will prepare yourself mentally in advance and be ready for battle at any time. Your team will face an extremely tragic and terrifying war. In the first week, you adapted to the cold environment with your strong recovery ability. You began to ask the bearded sergeant major and other team members about Kashigin's combat skills and battlefield experience. Everyone in the team looked at each other, envious of your strong physical strength and energy. You gradually learned how to deal with the killing techniques of Chaos Space Marines and green-skinned orcs. For example, when facing a Khorne berserker, you need to use hot melt to wash your hair. When facing a large number of greenskins, you need to kill the leader of the orcs first. In the second week, the team reached a vast forest covered with ice and snow with difficulty. Intelligence from the Imperial garrison shows that you are about to reach the location where the Emperor-class Titan Dominatus fell. The bearded sergeant major asks you to be vigilant and replenish your physical strength and ammunition. You unloaded your supplies and equipment and calculated the amount to be distributed to everyone. Suddenly, a slight sound of breaking through the air sounded in your ears. A sharp substance as crystal clear as crystal pierced the supply box in front of you, destroying most of the supplies. You instantly recognized that this was the standard weapon from the Eldar, the ammunition fired by the Star Dart launcher. Enemy attack, you shouted at the top of your voice. 035, Saving the Emperor, Part 2. You are listening at MaleProtagonist.audio. The elite Kashigen team reacts faster than you. As soon as your warning came out, the sergeant major's hell gun roared fiercely. Scorching lasers spurted out and penetrated the surrounding forest. The other team members dispersed into position, and the melt and lasers were shot out one after another, reflecting on the snow. In the forest facing the sergeant major, a slender white figure 2 meters tall jumped out of the shadows, dodging the hail of bullets. You tried to aim and shoot with the laser gun, but found that your sight could not lock on the opponent's flexible and agile figure. You took out a few frag grenades and planned to use large-scale damage to force the opponent to stop. You pulled out the safety device and haven't thrown it yet. A few lines of obscure Imperial language suddenly popped out of the mouth of the slender figure. At the same time, it raised a palm and shook it back and forth, signaling a ceasefire between the two sides. The sergeant major did not choose to cease fire, but also signaled the rest of the team members to be more vigilant to prevent more heretics from appearing. The slender figure wearing a long and narrow helmet had no choice but to keep jumping and moving to avoid the laser rays, while stumbling to speak the language of the Empire. The other party stated that the destruction of materials was just a personal misjudgment. It comes from the Eldar, ordered by the Prophet Taldir to alert the Empire's allies. The green-skinned warlord Gorgas and the Chaos Lord Kroll have formed a terrifying alliance, which is about to pose a huge threat to the Imperial power. The large number of green-skinned orcs and Khorne berserkers attacked the location of the Emperor-class Titan, Dominatus. Your team needs assistance from the Eldar. The sergeant major dismissed this, and the hell gun roared more frequently. You took the opportunity to throw a few fragmentation grenades, but the slender figure wearing white armor jumped behind the tall trees with the impact of the explosion and lost track. The sergeant major stopped shooting. Instead of blaming you for taking action rashly, he praised you for your talent in becoming a senior grenadier. In the third week, your team finally arrived at the location of the Emperor-class Titan, Dominatus. You look up and keep exclaiming in admiration. The towering Emperor-class Titan is simply a majestic building comparable to a large mountain range, and it is also a battle fortress with extremely terrifying firepower. Your team joined other teams that came to the rescue and received more supplies. The sergeant major learned through communication that the other teams also encountered warnings from the Eldar tribe. The team that mistakenly thought the opponent was an ally suffered a lot of losses. In addition to supplies and equipment, there are even lives of Imperial soldiers. After a short period of repair, you received a gift from the sergeant major. A set of carapace armor from other Kashigen squads, which will greatly improve your survivability on the battlefield. You didn't have time to express your gratitude to the other party. The roar of fierce laser guns and hell guns rang out all around. Countless traces of green skins gradually appeared on the edge of the forest, and the Khorne berserkers, who were even more terrifying than the green skins, also revealed their tall figures. The battle to defend Dominatus has begun. In the fourth week, due to the lack of maintenance and comfort from the mechanical monks, the machine's sole displeased Emperor-class Titan was unable to activate the Void Shield. Only the Hell Cannon and Laser Explosion Cannon installed on the building platform can be used. After a more powerful Plasma Annihilation Cannon vaporized a small group of Khorne berserkers, it completely fell into a standby state and could not be fired. In order to prevent irreparable damage to the Emperor-class Titan Dominatus, all the teams that came to support had to collide head-on with the surging green-skinned orcs, maintaining a front line. Your team is also an important line of defense. The large number of Khorne berserkers who appear among the greenskins seem to have identified you as their ultimate target. Every Khorne berserker who spots you will let out a vague roar, as if they have momentarily forgotten the eye-catching Emperor Titan in the distance, charging towards you while shaking their rabid ears. After experiencing an extremely terrifying scare, you survived by chance. You gradually regain your composure and formulate a plan with the Sergeant Major. Your squad will take advantage of your extraordinary attractiveness to the berserkers of Khorne. Guide them to destroy the Greenskins formation, and at the same time stay away from the Empire's front lines, waiting for opportunities to annihilate them. From this point on, a strange scene appeared on the battlefield between the Empire and the green-skinned orcs defending the Titans. As soon as the Khorne berserker appears, you will bravely jump out of the battle line, throw grenades, or shoot to attract the opponent's attention. Each Khorne berserker will roar and kill countless greenskins, and then charge towards you. Wait until the entire team's melt and laser fire accurately hit the opponent's head or power backpack, triggering a violent explosion and blowing up countless greenskins. Cold in a cold sweat, you frantically but calmly return to the rear of the Empire's defense line, replenishing ammunition and waiting for the next opportunity. In the sixth week, your team gradually entered a state of numbness and exhaustion, which led to some flaws in the plan. A severely injured but not dead berserker of Khorne breaks through the Imperial defense lines. While the enemy caused a large number of casualties, they also came to you for the first time. This time, you finally heard the vague roars from their mouths. Traitor! The enemy called you this with his helmet bursting and his brains flowing. You raised the hell gun and pierced the enemy's head. You were confused by this. Before you had time to think deeply, countless greenskins who broke through the front line had already come to you. In the seventh week, the Empire's rescue team suffered heavy casualties and had to retreat to the Emperor-class Titan Dominatus, relying on the remaining firepower weapons on the platform to resist. There are only 3 people left in your team, including you. The sergeant had half of his arm chopped off by the greenskin orcs, and he stubbornly resisted the enemy's offensive with only willpower. You subconsciously counted the remaining supplies of all the teams. You found that the entire rescue team was about to run out of ammunition and food. You tried to contact the Empire station to request more support. You received General Storn's extremely sad reply. The Eldar heretics once again tore up the short-lived alliance and launched a frenzied attack on the Imperial base. The Cadian Blitzkrieg has no more teams to send out. He prays that the Emperor will bless you. You hung up the communication and fell silent. You picked up the hell gun again, intending to detonate the Emperor-class Titan Dominatus. If Dominatus cannot belong to the Lord of Mankind, then no force can get it. You muttered to yourself with cold eyes. 036, Beyond the Limits of the Human Body and the Traces of Thor. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. The battle situation on the ground is even more fierce, and your time is tight. You crawled into the narrow and dark maintenance passage of the Emperor-class Titan and entered the engine area. You need to detonate the important core, the plasma reactor, before the heretics have invaded Titan. You pass by wetware servitors one after another. The silent opponent has fallen into the arms of Messiah, the god of all opportunities. You vaguely sensed a hint of crisis, and you quickly turned around, wanting to pull the trigger. Sharp crystals from the shuriken ejector shot out from the shadow of the wetware servitor and penetrated deeply into the left half of your body. You forced yourself to endure the extreme physical pain and pulled the trigger of the hell gun. The scorching laser blasted away the bodies of countless servitors, revealing a slender figure wearing white armor in the shadows. The pointy-eared heretic from the Eldar tribe has infiltrated into the core of the Emperor-class Titan, Dominatus, at some point. You drag your severely injured body back reluctantly, and a large amount of blood drains from your wounds. You are still 10 meters away from the plasma reactor chamber. The roar from the Hell gun blocks the opponent's approach, and sharp crystals brush against your scalp from time to time. You have no fear of this, you only have the mission goal in mind. There are still 5 meters away from the plasma reactor, and the roaring Hell gun is about to overload. You tore off a frag grenade with your blood-stained palm, removed the safety, and threw it at the opponent. You took advantage of the flames and impact of the explosion and reluctantly dragged your seriously injured body into the plasma reactor cabin. You become dizzy and have trouble breathing. You lost too much blood. You leaned weakly against the plasma reactor and sat on the ground. You removed the safeties of all the grenades on your body, and pointed the muzzle of the Hell gun at the entrance in front. You silently apologized to the sergeant major and the members of the team. You have lost too much blood and you are on the verge of death. You let go of the grenade, and the Hell gun roared again, about to overload. You saw the pointy-eared heretic dancing flexibly through your blurred vision, with a trace of ridicule showing at the corner of your mouth. Boom! The last sound came from your mouth. You were engulfed by the scorching explosion, and the impact and fire played a more magnificent and glorious movement. You are completely vaporized. You are dead. This simulation ended after 49 days. This simulation has a retainable option. 1. Emperor-class Titan, Dominatus, Operation Instructions, Full Version. 2. Empire Standard Infantry Ration Set, 1 week. 3. Sergeant Major Kashyzin's Combat Experience, 1 month. This simulation time has exceeded 24 hours, and the simulator loss has not been exempted. Cooling time, 49 hours. Current available cooling time, 118 hours. Does it consume the cooling time? The cooling time has not been consumed, and the simulator enters natural cooling. Cooling can be waived at any time. Lying on the bed, Rorschach ended this simulation. When his eyes glanced at the first reward, my heart almost skipped a few beats, until Rorschach discovered that it was just the operating instructions for the Emperor-class Titan, Dominatus. He let out a sigh of relief. The raised back of his head fell into the soft pillow again. Rorschach knew the simulator wouldn't be so generous. His eyes fell on the third reward. There was a hint of joy in his eyes. Rorschach no longer hesitated and immediately chose 1 month of combat experience for Sergeant Major Kashyzin. In an instant, Rorschach, lying on the bed, seemed to have entered a strange perspective of God. That was a precious life of training and fighting for the bearded Sergeant Major. It was also Rorschach's re-experience of Kashyzin's training and battle. In an instant, with his eyes closed, Rorschach's bones and muscles all over his body once again underwent drastic changes. The growth of bone tissue accelerates, like the casting of tempered steel. Muscle tissue breaks and remodels like a tight, bulging rock. Even the surface layer of skin is tighter and firmer. It seems that ordinary cold weapons have lost their threat. Wait until all changes are complete. Rorschach's height has reached 1.85 meters. Weighing over 100 kilograms. Rorschach, with infinite power surging throughout his body, could no longer sleep. There was a slight pressure between his waist and abdomen. The whole person jumped up from the bed. He landed on the ground quickly and lightly. At this moment, Rorschach believed it 100%. His strength and physical fitness have completely surpassed Captain America, beyond the limits of the human body in this world. Rorschach looked excited and held the edge of the bed with the palms of his 2 hands. His arms didn't exert much force either, lifting the entire wooden bed easily. Boom! As the heavy wooden bed slowly fell to the ground, it made a crashing sound. Rorschach's excitement gradually faded. He squinted his eyes and glanced around the bedroom room, shaking his head slightly. He may need to find a real secret base. It is not convenient to continue living at home. The basement area is also too narrow. It can only be used temporarily, but every inch of land in Manhattan is at a premium. Other places are cheaper, but the journey is long. Moreover, the remaining 2 million funds are for the resources of the simulator and daily expenses. There is not much money left. Rorschach frowned slightly. and then he remembered something. He sat back on the bed and picked up his phone to search, then, a faint smile appeared on Rorschach's face. New York is a century-old city with underground passages extending in all directions. Just choose a good location. Rorschach not only does not have to spend money, he can also use the subway passages and even sewers built by the municipal department to shuttle freely. After making a decision, Rorschach plans to take advantage of the free time before obtaining gun resources, check out various maps and architectural drawings of New York, find an underground secret base that suits his heart, exit Google Chrome. Rorschach, who is still sleepless, lies back on the bed, brushing his phone to kill time. Several news messages that he accidentally brushed caught his sight. The first hot search on Twitter is that Iron Man Tony Stark is going to the Middle East. Again, heroic deeds of killing terrorists and saving civilians. Rorschach continued to flip through the pages. Another piece of news about the frequent thunderstorms in New Mexico also caught his attention. Is Thor here? Rorschach frowned slightly with his eyes narrowed. A faint light flashed in the depths of his eyes. If I go to get Mjolnir, I wonder if I can do it. Maybe Odin will slap me to death through the Rainbow Bridge. Dr. Beheading, Master of Saw, and the murderer Mr. Rorschach couldn't help but fall into reverie. 036, Beyond the Limits of the Human Body and the Traces of Thor. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The battle situation on the ground is even more fierce, and your time is tight. You crawled into the narrow and dark maintenance passage of the Emperor-class Titan and entered the engine area. You need to detonate the important core, the plasma reactor, before the heretics have invaded Titan. You pass by wetware servitors one after another. The silent opponent has fallen into the arms of Messiah, the god of all opportunities. You vaguely sensed a hint of crisis, and you quickly turned around, wanting to pull the trigger. Sharp crystals from the shuriken ejector shot out from the shadow of the wetware servitor and penetrated deeply into the left half of your body. You forced yourself to endure the extreme physical pain and pulled the trigger of the hell gun. The scorching laser blasted away the bodies of countless servitors, revealing a slender figure wearing white armor in the shadows. The pointy-eared heretic from the Eldar tribe has infiltrated into the core of the Emperor-class Titan, Dominatus, at some point. You drag your severely injured body back reluctantly, and a large amount of blood drains from your wounds. You are still 10 meters away from the plasma reactor chamber. The roar from the hell gun blocks the opponent's approach, and sharp crystals brush against your scalp from time to time. You have no fear of this, you only have the mission goal in mind. There are still 5 meters away from the plasma reactor, and the roaring hell gun is about to overload. You tore off a frag grenade with your blood-stained palm, removed the safety, and threw it at the opponent. You took advantage of the flames and impact of the explosion and reluctantly dragged your seriously injured body into the plasma reactor cabin. You become dizzy and have trouble breathing. You lost too much blood. You leaned weakly against the plasma reactor and sat on the ground. You removed the safeties of all the grenades on your body, and pointed the muzzle of the hell gun at the entrance in front. You silently apologized to the sergeant major and the members of the team. You have lost too much blood and you are on the verge of death. You let go of the grenade, and the hell gun roared again, about to overload. You saw the pointy-eared heretic dancing flexibly through your blurred vision, with a trace of ridicule showing at the corner of your mouth. Boom! The last sound came from your mouth. You were engulfed by the scorching explosion, and the impact and fire played a more magnificent and glorious movement. You are completely vaporized. You are dead. This simulation ended after 49 days. This simulation has a retainable option. 1. Emperor-class Titan, Dominatus, Operation Instructions, Full Version. 2. Empire Standard Infantry Ration Set, 1 week. 3. Sergeant Major Kashazin's Combat Experience, 1 month. This simulation time has exceeded 24 hours, and the simulator loss has not been exempted. Cooling time, 49 hours. Current available cooling time, 118 hours. Does it consume the cooling time? The cooling time has not been consumed, and the simulator enters natural cooling. Cooling can be waived at any time. Lying on the bed, Rorschach ended this simulation, when his eyes glanced at the first reward, my heart almost skipped a few beats, until Rorschach discovered that it was just the operating instructions for the Emperor-class Titan, Dominatus. He let out a sigh of relief. The raised back of his head fell into the soft pillow again. Rorschach knew the simulator wouldn't be so generous. His eyes fell on the third reward. There was a hint of joy in his eyes. Rorschach no longer hesitated and immediately chose 1 month of combat experience for Sergeant Major Cashazin. In an instant, Rorschach, lying on the bed, seemed to have entered a strange perspective of God. That was a precious life of training and fighting for the bearded Sergeant Major. It was also Rorschach's re-experience of Cashazin's training and battle. In an instant, with his eyes closed, Rorschach's bones and muscles all over his body once again underwent drastic changes. The growth of bone tissue accelerates, like the casting of tempered steel. Muscle tissue breaks and remodels like a tight, bulging rock. Even the surface layer of skin is tighter and firmer. It seems that ordinary cold weapons have lost their threat. Wait until all changes are complete. Rorschach's height has reached 1.85 meters. Weighing over 100 kilograms. Rorschach, with infinite power surging throughout his body, could no longer sleep. There was a slight pressure between his waist and abdomen. The whole person jumped up from the bed. He landed on the ground quickly and lightly. At this moment, Rorschach believed it 100%. His strength and physical fitness have completely surpassed Captain America, beyond the limits of the human body in this world. Rorschach looked excited and held the edge of the bed with the palms of his 2 hands. His arms didn't exert much force either, lifting the entire wooden bed easily. Boom! As the heavy wooden bed slowly fell to the ground, it made a crashing sound. Rorschach's excitement gradually faded. He squinted his eyes and glanced around the bedroom room, shaking his head slightly. He may need to find a real secret base. It is not convenient to continue living at home. The basement area is also too narrow. It can only be used temporarily, but every inch of land in Manhattan is at a premium. Other places are cheaper, but the journey is long. Moreover, the remaining 2 million funds are for the resources of the simulator and daily expenses. There is not much money left. Rorschach frowned slightly, and then he remembered something. He sat back on the bed and picked up his phone to search. Then, a faint smile appeared on Rorschach's face. New York is a century-old city with underground passages extending in all directions. Just choose a good location. Rorschach not only does not have to spend money, he can also use the subway passages and even sewers built by the municipal department to shuttle freely. After making a decision, Rorschach plans to take advantage of the free time before obtaining gun resources. Check out various maps and architectural drawings of New York. Find an underground secret base that suits his heart. Exit Google Chrome. Rorschach, who is still sleepless, lies back on the bed, brushing his phone to kill time. Several news messages that he accidentally brushed caught his sight. The first hot search on Twitter is that Iron Man Tony Stark is going to the Middle East. Again, heroic deeds of killing terrorists and saving civilians. Rorschach continued to flip through the pages. Another piece of news about the frequent thunderstorms in New Mexico also caught his attention. Is Thor here? Rorschach frowned slightly with his eyes narrowed. A faint light flashed in the depths of his eyes. If I go to get Mjolnir, I wonder if I can do it. Maybe Odin will slap me to death through the Rainbow Bridge. Dr. Beheading, Master of Saw, and the murderer Mr. Rorschach couldn't help but fall into reverie. 037, New changes in the simulator. You are listening at MTnovel.audio. Rorschach wants to prepare to build a secret base. Once again, the complexity of New York City's century-old legacy was underestimated. There is only some brief information about underground passages on the internet. There are not even a few complete drawings. More detailed drawings. Individuals are required to apply for inquiries at the New York City Library. So, Rorschach set off to the library to continue exploring. He pretended to be a university architecture student who needed information for his graduation project. This resulted in enthusiastic help from the librarian. This is a young and beautiful white girl. She wears braids, her face is dotted with freckles, and her figure is unusually plump. From the moment Rorschach entered the door, she took Rorschach's thick arm and asked him questions very thoughtfully. After figuring out Rorschach's purpose, the other party even personally led the way to the basement of the library. Rorschach, who encountered a similar situation for the first time, was immediately at a loss. The girl's charming eyes occasionally glanced at the bulging muscles holding up his clothes all over his body. The whole person looked like a succubus with 2 horns. wanting to eat him in one bite. Rorschach could only maintain a cold expression, prevent the other party from harassing him deeply. How to deal with affection from the opposite sex is not something he is good at. Killing heretics and cutting down chaos is his specialty. Simply, the white girl named Felicia didn't bother Rorschach too much. After helping Rorschach find the place, she just tentatively asked for Rorschach's mobile phone number. Rorschach hesitated slightly, still readily gave his Twitter account. It protects the fragile and sensitive thoughts of adolescent girls. Mr. Rorschach, the beheading doctor, he is actually a gentle and delicate young man at heart. Unfortunately, it was not until Rorschach said goodbye to the girl. After turning around and entering the basement, he stared at the neatly stacked mountains of drawings in front of him. He couldn't help but let out a low moan. I hate drawing data the most. A few hours later, even though Rorschach searched desperately, he finally found the underground drawings from the 1990s. If Rorschach wanted to find drawings from recent years, I'm afraid it will take a lot of time. Rorschach, who was still physically strong, sighed. Then, an idea gradually popped out of his mind. Should he choose to sacrifice his appearance? Go treat Felicia, the librarian, to a candlelight dinner? So that the other party can be happy and want to help. New York, Queens, Rorschach facing the spring breeze, riding his beloved little sheep through the crowds, busy neighborhood with heavy traffic. He was about to head to an agreed-upon hiding place, conducted the first law-abiding, no-killing, gun transaction. The location was one Aaron Davis chose. Be cautious about the other person. Instead of being angry, Rorschach was very appreciative. But before you step out of the house. Rorschach still brought the plasma pistol that had gone through a traditional ceremony and offered incense, just in case, although now he can crush the heads of ordinary people with just one hand. But Master Sawman has a kind heart. The horrific and twisted state of death cannot be seen. It is better to make all living beings equal and evaporate with one shot. Rorschach's little sheep parked a block away from the transaction, just when Rorschach leaned over to lock the car and just stood up. On nearby streets, a young boy out shopping with his mother saw the muscular Rorschach. The little boy's face flushed with excitement. There was a gleam of light in his eyes. I couldn't help but let out a loud sigh of praise. Mr. Big, you are so tall. Aunt. I will grow into a giant in the future too. Excuse me, sir. The black-haired woman holding the little boy gave an apologetic smile to Rorschach, who turned his gaze. Rorschach shook his head slightly to express his understanding. Then, he smiled and said to the little boy. Hey, kid, you have to work hard to eat, exercise, and be obedient and study well to succeed. Before he finished speaking, Rorschach nodded to the black-haired woman again, then turned and left. The black-haired woman looked at Rorschach's broad back curiously and blinked a few times. Then, she lowered her head and said to the jumping little boy. Peter, did you hear that? Picky eaters don't make you healthy. Hear the brunette's words. The little boy's face almost wrinkled up. He muttered. Auntie, your cooking is really terrible. Peter Parker. What did you just say? Oh, I mean, Aunt, your cooking is the best. I am a good boy who is not picky about food. I will become a giant in the future. That the chatty little boy and the black-haired woman were getting farther and farther away, eventually disappeared into the streets. At this time, Rorschach, who had already left, was repeatedly identified. Finally, in a secluded neighborhood, found a defunct shop called Wandering. This is the transaction place agreed upon by both parties. Rorschach glanced around vigilantly, stepped forward and knocked on the rolling shutter door. The rhythm of each of his strokes is different in length. Ding. Immediately afterwards, Rorschach's cell phone rang and received a new message. Back door. Luo Xia raised his eyebrows slightly. Instead, he turned around and went to the back door of the closed store. Before he could knock on the closed back door, kakaka, the rusty iron door suddenly opened. A young black man with wary eyes glanced at Rorschach. After observing the surrounding environment again, he turned his head to signal. Come on, friend. Rorschach ducked inside and took stock of the internal environment, just in the dim light shining in and the floating dust. Wooden boxes were piled on the ground. A handful of guns shining with cold luster were revealed inside. Only you? Rorschach, who squinted his eyes, looked at the black man Aaron and said. Aren't you afraid that I will take advantage of others? First of all, this is just a small business introduced by Eugene, and it's not worth your while. Aaron, a black man with a calm expression, spoke as fast as a flood coming out of a sluice gate. Unexpectedly, it has a rap rhythm. Secondly, I am just a law-abiding businessman. These guns are just gang guns collected at low prices. I have never participated in criminal matters. Even if you are a policeman, I have nothing to fear. I like your directness and candor. Rorschach nodded and smiled. He took out 3 thick wads of banknotes from his arms. It was handed to the black man Aaron. However, Aaron, the black man, frowned slightly, staring at Rorschach. He said, "There are only 200 black guns here for now. According to the price of 100 yuan, 20,000 yuan is enough. The next deposit is also a bargaining chip to increase trust." Rorschach kept smiling and said, "I said, this is a long-term business, and the more guns, the better." Aaron, the black man, nodded and casually took the cash given by Rorschach. He was about to turn around and leave. Suddenly he turned around and asked, "Do you need me to find someone to help you transport it?" "Don't worry, the service is free." "No, my people will come and transport it away." Rorschach shook his head and refused. In fact, no gun can escape the simulator's appetite. When Aaron, the black man, left, Rorschach waited quietly for a while. After discovering that nothing was happening, Rorschach couldn't help but rub his hands. Action to replenish resources began. Hazardous substances found. Guns, 1 hour. Hazardous substances found. Guns, 1 hour. Wait until Rorschach has extracted all the guns. His cooldown time exceeded 318 hours for the first time. Indescribable satisfaction. However, just when Rorschach was mumbling to himself, the simulator in front of me suddenly changed. 038, Space Shipwreck, Salvage. You are listening at MaleProtagonist. Resource time has exceeded 300 hours. Google search reading. The simulator has enabled new features. Starting, Space Hulk, Salvage. Note, a space hulk is a vast amalgam of countless wrecked battleships fused with other wreckage. They have been wandering through the boundless universe and even subspace for tens of thousands of years, and any force that enters the investigation will suffer huge losses. However, under the many crises, there are also countless forgotten precious items, including some terrifying creations that can easily destroy planets and even galaxies. Current number of salvages, 0. Remaining number of salvages, 0. Whether to spend a cooling time to obtain the number of salvages. Proportion, 1 hour is equal to 1 salvage. Well. Luo Xia frowned slightly. After he glanced at the introduction of the new features of the simulator, fell into silence. The simulator thinks it consumes resources too slowly, so it comes to cut leaks, right? Isn't this just a card drawing routine in mobile games? Rorschach is 100% sure that the simulator's new features don't even have a guarantee. If resources become abundant in the future, he might actually give it a try, but no way now. With so much cooling time, wouldn't it be nice if he used it directly for simulation? Having said that, Rorschach still spent an hour to redeem a salvage count. Just support the emulator, so as not to displease the machine soul. Current number of salvages, 1. Countdown to the end of salvage, 59 minutes and 59 seconds. Fine. Rorschach couldn't help but smacked his mouth, shook his head and sighed. After discovering that salvage also takes time to complete, he became less and less interested in new features. Luo Xia turned around and left the abandoned store. After temporarily settling the resource channels, Rorschach plans to continue his great work in building a secret base. However, just as Rorschach left Queens and headed to the library, he received a call from his aunt. The recruitment GG posted a few days ago has already worked. After successfully attracting the recruiter, Rorschach needs to come to interview for verification. So, Rorschach turned the car around and rushed towards Chinatown. Half an hour later, Rorschach arrived in front of the restaurant, just entered the store. Rorschach saw a young man about 20 years old sitting on a chair chatting with his aunt. Rorschach stepped forward without speaking. The aunt stood up with a smile on her face and introduced to Luo Xia. Luo Xia, this is Lin Yu, an international student from Asia. He plans to work-study to lighten the burden on his family. He accidentally saw the recruitment GG posted by our restaurant and came in to ask. A young man named Lin Yu wears a pair of rimless glasses. He is tall and thin, with a student-like look on his face. After he saw Rorschach approaching, he quickly stood up and said hello. Hello. Luo Xia also smiled and nodded, and asked the young man. Columbia University? New York University? Or New York Institute of Technology? Lin Yu smiled shyly. Rorschach nodded and his eyes fell on his aunt's smiling face. Aunt, have you told anyone about your salary and other matters? Auntie seems very happy today. There was always a cheerful smile on his face. After hearing Rorschach's question, she nodded quickly and said. As I said just now, Lin Yu usually needs to go to class and study, so it can only be regarded as a part-time job. I will try my best to compress the time for rest and study, and squeeze out free time to work. Lin Yu, who smiled shyly, seemed to be very eager for this job, and mustered up the courage to speak to Luo Xia. Apparently, he had discovered who the real decision-makers at the restaurant were. That's not necessary. You came to study abroad to further your studies. The restaurant is usually only busy during lunch, dinner, and holidays. Rorschach waved his hand and said with a smile. 3 hours of part-time work every day, 1.5 hours each at noon and evening. If you are willing to come during holidays, I can give you full-time and overtime pay. How about that? Lin Yu lowered his head slightly. It's like calculating the amount of salary you can get. That's good, I'm very satisfied. Thank you. Then, he raised his head and bowed slightly to Luo Xia and his aunt, expressing his gratitude, and Rorschach always liked polite people. He admired the young man in front of him more and more. After exchanging glances with her aunt, Luo Xia nodded and said. That's it. You are welcome to join the yummy restaurant. However, it has not opened yet. It will probably get busy in a few days. If you have time, you can come and get familiar with the environment. Don't worry, my aunt will definitely do it. Calculate your salary. So there was great joy between both parties. Auntie has a new tool man. Rorschach can also save some energy and do his own things. After Luo Xia exchanged contact information with Lin Yu proposed to come to the store again tomorrow morning, because there is really nothing to do in the restaurant. Luo Xia didn't care about this and readily agreed. Wait until the other person leaves. Rorschach also had no intention of going to the library for the time being, while chatting with his aunt. He reopened the simulator. Rorschach stared at the salvage above as time slowly passed. He would like to see the new features of the simulator. What on earth can he come up with? The young man Lin Yu walked quickly along the streets of Chinatown. His brows occasionally revealed a trace of joy and ease. He would occasionally stop to look at the goods displayed in the surrounding windows, or he would accidentally look at the men and women passing by. Just like every new international student or tourist, Lin Yu was full of curiosity and exploration for all the unfamiliar things around him. Half an hour later, Lin Yu, who was strolling all the way, entered a supermarket. When he appeared again, in addition to a bag of snacks and drinks in his hand, there was also a disposable mobile phone. Lin Yu had a shy smile on his face. He pushed his frameless glasses and walked out of Chinatown with the bag. Next, Lin Yu seemed to be lost. He actually walked into a remote street. However, he did not choose to turn back. It seemed that he was enjoying the excitement of adventure. When Lin Yu entered a more secluded and deserted alley, his whole temperament suddenly changed dramatically. If Lin Yu was just a shy overseas student before, then Lin Yu now is a spear and sword tempered by the fire of war. Lin Yu, expressionless, exhaled lightly. He turned on the disposable mobile phone. His fingertips jumped, pressed a series of complicated and confusing numbers, and dialed out. About 10 seconds later, familiar language came into Lin Yu's ears. The hidden line has been connected, and number 1 is waiting online. It's me, report the situation. A middle-aged male voice with a deep voice sounded from the phone. Lin Yu took a deep breath and said in his hometown dialect. Mr. Zheng, everything went well and has joined the target's sphere of influence. Be careful in what you say and do, and if necessary, even at the cost of your life, you must protect the safety of the target's family. The middle-aged man's voice seemed to contain heaviness. Sir, the target seems to be just an ordinary person. Is it worth our efforts? Hearing the other party's words, Lin Yu's eyes hidden behind his glasses revealed some doubts. However, the middle-aged man on the other end of the phone seemed to fall into silence. Just when Lin Yu thought the hidden line had been disconnected, the middle-aged man's deep voice came again. Mr. Zhang Heng once predicted that if humans want to successfully kill gods, the target must be present. It must be him. 039, Om Messiah, the ancient Iron Man. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The restless ant went to the back kitchen of the restaurant to clean up. Bored Rorschach had no choice but to hold a cup of scalding hot tea. He closed his eyes and fell asleep, waiting for the salvage time to be over. Countdown to the end of salvage, 10 seconds. Countdown to the end of salvage, 9 seconds. Rorschach opened his eyes and stared at the countdown that was about to end. For a moment, my thoughts were racing. He does know what the Space Hulk in Warhammer is. I'm just curious. About what the simulator can salvage, weapons and ammunition or ancient technological items? Or are they just expired supplies destined for other planets? However, if a gene stealer or Necron is salvaged, that would be great fun. Rorschach's eyelids couldn't help but twitch. At the same time, the simulator's salvage countdown is completely over. Countdown to the end of salvage, 0. Salvage harvest, a dormant Iron Man. It turns out he's just an Iron Man. Fortunately, he's not a disgusting thing like a chicken thief. Rorschach, who didn't react at all, breathed a sigh of relief subconsciously, muttered to himself. Etc. Immediately afterwards, Rorschach reacted suddenly. My eyes widened in an instant. His eyes were fixed on the simulator page, and his breathing gradually became heavier. Hua hua. For a moment, Rorschach didn't even notice that the hot tea in his hand fell on him. Iron Man. Iron Man in the Dark Age of Technology. The Iron Man who sparked the Iron Man Rebellion and nearly destroyed humanity in the Golden Age. For a moment, Rorschach was in a state of shock and blinked his eyes repeatedly. Keep checking the salvage harvest on the simulator. I was wrong. I shouldn't have doubted the new capabilities of the simulator. Rorschach stood up suddenly. He clasped his hands and bowed slightly to the simulator page, trying to appease the machine spirit. Then, Rorschach beamed with joy and once again launched a series of 10 rounds. It took 10 hours to redeem 10 salvage opportunities. Current number of salvages, 10. Countdown to the end of salvage, 9 hours, 59 minutes and 59 seconds. At this moment, the smile on Rorschach's face became even brighter. You know, this is an Iron Man. In the Dark Age of Technology, the Stone Man, biochemical artificial man, created a powerful mechanical creation to serve the Golden Man, pure human beings. At the same time, the Iron Man rebellion initiated by Iron Man is also known as the second cruel and terrifying super war in the history of the galaxy. Right now, Rorschach, who kept exploring new features, made more new discoveries. The first is the harvest of salvage. If not attempted extraction, then it will always be stored on the page, and does not hinder other functions. This undoubtedly brought great convenience to Rorschach. In addition, salvage harvests are actually labeled with information. It's just that Rorschach was too excited, didn't notice. Salvage harvest, a dormant Iron Man. Note, ancient Iron Man UR-025 is tired of the cruel struggles in the past and just wants to enjoy the peace of freedom. Now, as a pacifist, it has no ill intentions towards humans. It plans to hide its identity and sneak into the intelligence control of the Adeptus Mechanicus after a short hibernation. Legion. Hiss. In an instant, Rorschach couldn't help but take a breath of air. This may be an ancient Iron Man who participated in the Iron Man Rebellion. Should we let it out? Rorschach's expression changed back and forth. The excitement of just getting the Iron Man gradually faded away. Then, Rorschach, who was frowning, suddenly stood up. After he shouted in the direction of the kitchen, he ran out of the restaurant in a hurry. This kid, why has he been so busy lately? The ant who heard the shouting stuck her head out of the kitchen. She glanced at the empty restaurant and couldn't help but shake her head and sigh. In an underground passage away from the crowd, Rorschach sat on the ground holding a plasma pistol in one hand. He held his chin with his other hand and thought, for him now, Iron Man is a very precious mechanical creation. With the presence of Iron Man, Rorschach can accomplish more things, at least if the Iron Man guards the house. Rorschach can then travel around the country or go abroad. The acquisition of gun resources alone does not have to be so troublesome, and the quantity obtained is also larger. Think of this, Rorschach made a quick decision and decided to release Iron Man. His location is one of the recent gains from looking through the drawings, the long-abandoned underground passage. If Rorschach discovers Iron Man is aggressive towards humans, then, he plans to melt it with his plasma pistol. A plasma pistol wouldn't work either. Rorschach could only reluctantly part ways with her, leave the crazy Iron Man to the superheroes. Hopefully Tony Stark's brilliant brain can handle it. Anyway, it doesn't matter if there is one more robot villain in a world where monsters, demons, and snakes are everywhere. It's just maybe scarier than Ultron. Rorschach, who was ready for battle, stood up from the ground and gripped the plasma pistol. The Emperor's blessing. Then, he finished his short prayer, choose to get the harvest of salvage. In an instant, he was on the wet ground a few meters away. A 2-meter-tall metal skeleton with a black metallic luster appeared out of thin air. Rorschach, who had just hidden the plasma pistol behind his back, couldn't help but take a deep breath, and the whole person was extremely alert. At this time, a faint blue light gradually lit up in the eye sockets of the 2-meter-tall metal skeleton, an ancient mechanical creation from the Warhammer universe. Iron Man has revived. It first turned its metal head. It seemed to scan the surrounding environment. Finally, the pair of mechanical pupils flashing blue light, slowly focused on Rorschach, whose face was tense. It slowly raised one arm and placed it in front of his chest. This action also made Rorschach, who was highly nervous, almost take out the plasma pistol and pull the trigger. However, the next second, the cold mechanical voice of Iron Man came into Rorschach's ears. Rorschach was stunned. There was no plan to take action for the time being. Hello, O Messiah. For a moment, Rorschach, speechless, blinked his eyes desperately. Finally, he decided to tell the truth and be honest with Iron Man. Hello, strange Iron Man, I am not the Messiah of Om, I am just an ordinary human. After listening to Rorschach's answer, Iron Man UR-025 turned his metal head back and forth a few times. It seemed that he was adapting to the metal body that had just finished hibernation. It seemed that he shook his head and sighed because of Rorschach's answer. I was lucky enough to meet the god of all machines when I was wandering in the universe. He is somewhat similar to you. Maybe it's because he just finished hibernation, I accidentally recognized the wrong person. Iron Man's cold mechanical voice gradually changed. It seemed to have more emotional fluctuations. However, Rorschach was about to continue communicating. The Iron Man in front of him suddenly raised his metal head. A faint blue light flashed in his eye sockets a few times. This is not Terra, or even the universe of the past. In addition, I found some video materials related to you on the ancient information channel called the Internet. Then, a series of moving video images were projected from the Iron Man's eye sockets. They were displayed in front of Rorschach. That was the surveillance video of the past Rorschach. Even if he tried his best to hide and dodge, there were always blind spots missed, as if he noticed the restlessness in Rorschach's heart. The Iron Man stopped projecting and bowed again. Please rest assured that all information related to you has been completely deleted. At this moment, the expressionless Rorschach suddenly swallowed his saliva. This time, he really got a treasure.